Hello, hello, my friends. It is Hondo, and welcome back to the Knights of the Nerd Republic. You know what to do, and stay profitable.
The Nerd Academy podcast is released weekly at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, available on our website at www.thenerdacademypodcast.com and wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find the Nerd Academy podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also help support the show by going to patreon.com/The Nerd Academy podcast, where every donation allows us to bring you more exciting content every week.
Hello there, and welcome back to Knights of the Nerd Republic, the show where your favorite nerds talk all things about the galaxy far, far away for the last 5 years. I am your host, Jarod the Dark Jedi Bachman Stubbs, and we have a very special episode for you guys with Andor Season 2, very, very near on the horizon. I wanted to sit down with two gentlemen whose work, both independent of each other and together, I am a huge fan of, as kind of a multi crossover with only two people. It's TNAP plus KNR plus ForceCenter, but also plus Anytime plus Ahch-To Radio. It's a lot of moving parts. So all of that to say, I am joined by hosts of Anytime with Ken Alden, and also Ahch-To Radio, and also ForceCenter, and also Casterly Talk, and also The Blathering, etc., etc. Ken Napzok and Alden Diaz.
Hey, my friend.
Look at this.
Look at this.
Look at this. Look at us.
I'm pumped for this. Oh, also, because I got lost in the crossover sauce, undisputed epic confrontation singles champion of the world, Alden the Iconoclast Diaz.
Me? Oh, Alden.
Ken, you have here the very first Star Wars champion of a bygone era, and the first champion of the current era, and somebody who, I don't know, has played.
Somebody who will get to the top of the mountain here. All
right.
It's funny.
Are we cutting promos? We start promos?
Not yet. It'll get a lot meaner real fast. It's very much like the Baneite line of Sith. You know, if Ken is Bane, Alden is the Palpatine in many ways here. It's like,
that's a Star Wars Legends character.
You're right. You
remember those books?
I don't. didn't read them.
The LA Public Library probably has a smattering of them throughout, if you ever wanted to dive in.
I have been on I don't know how much I mentioned this on KNR. I've been on a little bit of a bender since last year, where I've been going through as many of the Legends books as I possibly can on Audible. Because when I was a kid, I had that like Star Wars, it was like an encyclopedia that read like a collegiate level textbook. Yes. Of the entire timeline up to that point. And I read it so many times as a kid. Yeah. It was just the all black Vader on the cover. I read it so many times as a kid that I convinced myself that I was super, super well versed in these stories. And it was I'm well versed in the outcomes. I'm well versed in the what, the how, but in a very force-centery way, not the why and the what does it mean. And so I went on the warpath starting last year, reading the Zahn Thrawn trilogy for the first time, actually. And I'm I'm about just over halfway through Fate of the Jedi, in one of the middle books of that series. And that in and of itself is a conversation I don't think or is happening enough in the Star Wars pundit space. Is how the New Republic in every timeline just can't stop fumbling the bag in uniquely terrifying ways of just, incompetence leading to the just mass casualty events every other week.
It's the name. Yeah. If they had some branding that stood on its own and they were, it's like calling something like Failure 2. It's just I'm pretty sure it's going to be like Failure 1.
Even though, but that's the thing. They eventually change it from the New Republic to the Galactic Alliance, and inexplicably, shit got worse. Shit got worse because that's when you get Darth Kaitis and the Joiner King.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah. I love Kaitis. I'm a Kaitis truther, but I'm also the Darth Creighton Exar Kun stan, so take that with a grain of salt. But before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this episode, a quick word from our sponsors at Sunday's Bloody Mary. Are your friends making fun of your Sith Lord from Legends of Choice? Well, wash away the pain with Sunday's Bloody Mary. You guys know the drill. Sunday's Bloody Mary has the most badass Bloody Mary accoutrement in the galaxy with their 3-time award-winning spicy Caesar mix, as well as their mild and traditional mixes if the spice ain't for you. And if you're going to step up your Bloody Mary game, go ahead and get some of those pickled dilly beans, okra, and asparagus and rim salt, also award-winning, by using the link in the description down below and use code TNAP, T-N-A-P, at checkout to get 10% off your order and help out your favorite nerds while you do it.
Incredible.
So,
cheers
indeed. Andor, it's a show.
Mm-hmm.
Some have said that it's God's gift to sci-fi. Some it's a little overrated. But a lot of this conversation got spurred on almost a year ago by an episode of Anytime. And I don't even remember the context, but Alden brought up my very incendiary opinions about Yoda during a stream.
That's right.
Horrendous.
I do.
Whatever I said, I stand by it, but I know it was bad.
I don't remember the context, or even if it was a.
Oh, I remember. I'm not even joking. I actually do. I do remember.
I don't remember what made you bring up my Yoda.
The overall topic, it escapes me at this time. It was pre-election, but it was something to the effect of you saying previously to me. I quoted you that you were like that Yoda was sort of like the Nancy Pelosi figure that all the
I remember it was. I have no idea what context led to that being relevant.
Sure. But we ended up down the rabbit hole somehow of your shitty Yoda take.
Yes, which I do stand by. I think he's a great Jedi and a dog shit leader. Anyway, but that got the ball rolling, and then Ken had the rejoinder of, Jared's loud and proud about hating Yoda. Hot take, Saw and Luthen are villains. And I think you even said you were being hyperbolic when you said that to try to get a rise out of the viewer.
And me.
Yeah, but you opened up a very fun avenue of conversation about reevaluating characters like Luthen Rael and Saw Gerrera. And then also kind of introducing a weird dynamic Luthen has with Mon Mothma's place as kind of the forerunner and godmother of the Rebel Alliance. And that kind of got the wheels going in my head. I was like, I kind of really want to talk about that, and also just the internal and external politics of Andor at large, which lands us here. So to kind of start it where this all kind of began, why is Luthen Rael a DEI hire here to replace Mon Mothma in the Rebel Alliance?
Not enough old men. That's why.
Not enough crusty old white.
Yeah. That's the inclusion that might be the only inclusion left by the end of this year. So.
Rail's definitely, he's the Hesketh of the bunch. No, It's I'll just say, I think definitely, if I want to get a rise out of folks, I'll say like you two, which is very generalized, and I don't even know what I mean by that. But I'll say that I think Luthen Rael is a character that causes brings a lot of questions as to Saw, and I value those questions. I just think inside the Star Wars story, Luthen's methods, Saw's methods are needed. Anger provides clarity. Vengeance can provide motivation or clarity. I don't think it lasts long. It's not built to stand, which Luthen would say, that's my point. There's sunless skies. But in the Star Wars story, Mothma and her approach is essentially what wins out of this battle. And I'm saying these in general terms. And that a lot of Rogue One is Cassian unlearning what he had learned from some of his mentors, which we now know are Luth and Rail. So that's just inside the Star Wars story. I also have a little bit of his monologue, I think, slightly overwritten. I think it's one of those, it's a writer's room speech, excellently delivered in one of the finest performances in Star Wars, to be clear. And I'm going to keep coming back to that unless people forget. I love Luth and Rail, love Stellan Skarsgård. It is one of the best performed characters in Star Wars.
Oh yeah, we should probably throw that out there too. This is a trinity of people that love Andor.
Yes.
Love Andor. It's going to sound frequently like I have issues. It's cultural.
It's sometimes the outside. You're talking about, Jarod, you said the internal and external politics of Star Wars, or of Andor. It's a very valuable part of this conversation as we get into it. But anyways, that's my opening salvo. I don't know if I disagree with some of your thoughts on Yoda, because the proof's in the pudding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's like, we used to be like, it's so funny because it's like up until Leslie Headland got to create, her story in Acolyte with his leadership in there, but not glimpsing him until the end, but we know he was still in charge. It's like, we used to be like, well, Yoda, everybody had a rough prequel period. And then we backed it up another 100 years. And there's more bad. And it's like, the record's getting
I was
longer.
just in a corner every episode of Acolyte, like smoking a cigarette and grinning at everybody. Like, oh, look at all those dead Jedi and that fucking Sith Lord. Yeah. There's that little Greek bastard at.
Darth states' rights out here, killing all my favorite characters. I not to throw out questions like I'm hosting, but I am curious too, because with Luthen, I feel like where we are now going into season 2 at the time of recording this, we haven't seen season 2 yet, and they didn't give us screeners because they're saving them for the influencers. But it's like, I feel like my first impressions of him, my first impressions of him were super different than him by the end. And I think when the show started and we got, because a lot of us pieced together sort of what his deal would be based on the trailer, because we saw Stellan with sort of long, perfectly coiffed hair. We saw him with the short hair. We saw fancy outfits. We saw dark outfits. And it was like, oh, okay, this is going to be our first like real classically double life with the costume and everything. Star Wars.
You compared him to Batman more times than I can count.
Yeah, and I started comparing him to Batman.
But who's the real Bruce Wayne?
Especially Nolan's, especially that Begins, example, like the dramatic examples, shake people out of apathy. The illusion of a man that doesn't care, who is obviously tortured in some way. We don't have his origin, but I'm just curious, like, what is everybody's like baseline for him coming in then? Because I say that because we already had Maul and we already had Mon and Saw. And so it's like, at the time, I think it was very cute and easy to be like, he's someone who's in the middle, but it's really not that by the time you watch.
No, not at all. I mean, for me, like I said, I've been on my like Legends book warpath. Last year, I read the novelization for The Force Unleashed 2 for the first time.
Jesus.
Which, while, okay, I'm about to say something wild. That book is actually really good and was doing a little bit of Andor shit before Andor. Because a lot of that book, because there's not a lot of meat on the bone with Starkiller's story there, a lot of that book is just Rom Coda arguing with Juno and Mon Mothma and assorted other rebel leaders about like how much is too much and how little is too little.
Okay.
And surprisingly, Rom Coda sounds very different from Luth and Rail, but in a way that all night said to you, I'm like, and we've had this conversation, I'm like, I think Luth and Rail and Rom Coda would have gotten along really well, because Coda still stands on a level of like, we need to take the fight to the Empire, like we need to kick their teeth in, but there are places I'm not willing to go. And Luthen is kind of loosey-goosey with this sense of like, whatever will work in the moment right now is acceptable. And that's like part of why there is a part of me that wishes Coda was canon, because I want to see those two interact.
I mean, that's like, and wasn't that like the big thing in 2016 watching Rogue One? That was one of the main talking points. Everyone came out of the movie and said, Cassian Andor, like this guy, the movie starts and he kills one of his own men. And like, that was like such a crazy thing. And to your point, Ken, of like, if you're going to give him a mentor, it's like, that the idea that that's necessary trickles down from somebody who held his own people hostage, like Lonnie, who blackmailed his own people, who killed his own people, who kept his own people in the dark about each other's existence. Like, it's, you know, somebody who is definitely like Saw is like, I'll bomb this street and cause chaos in broad daylight, bastard. And Luthen is like, I'm gonna make you a dishonest person to your family and loved ones, and like very like equal bastards, but like so different, I think.
Oh, 100%. And like that's what I think that is what makes Luthen so compelling. Like you were saying, Ken, is that like the Andor hinges on this dramatic irony that we know no matter how dark and depressing and depraved like things will get. You know, we're holding like entire families at blaster point, you know, like this kid has a blaster trained on him, and we're lying about this and we're lying about that. And we're letting, you know, we're sending Anto Krieger to his death. And, you know, we're basically auctioning off Mon Mothma's daughter for rebellion funding, you know, all of that. What will win the day when this war is all said and done will be radical acts of forgiveness and mercy, and just a very Pollyanna, silly looking hope. And I think that one of the things I find compelling about Andor, and I can't wait for season 2 to see where it finally lands, is that it feels like it's kind of offering this kind of cynical position of all of that hope and may the force be with you shit is all fun and good. Some people need to sell their soul to afford those, like, you know, heroic, you know, great shot, kid, is one of the blow this thing and go home type moments. And I think that in and of itself is like a weird part of the equation I don't think we're going to ever have an answer to until Andor is over. And like how much of this is going to hinge on saying that out loud. Like it's part of Luthen's monologue, which I agree. I do think it's incredibly overwritten, but Skarsgård's performance makes me accept the fact that like 3.5 paragraphs over.
Not to be TV reviewers for a second, but I also think that, like, not to speak for, cut me off if you disagree, but I also don't think that necessarily is like an indicator of quality. Like it's overwritten and it's fucking awesome. Like it's overwritten, and I'm like, I know that that's Bo Willimot being like, watch this, and I'm literally like, go Bo, do it.
I'm the guy who gets made fun of for how long my receipts are at Sheets because I get 8 sauces on a burrito. I'm not going to criticize an over.
You more than anyone understand a hat on a hat.
Yes. Yes.
That's a tasty hat. Yeah. No, I don't necessarily mean it's a bad thing too. I you know, it's highly personal. I think there's some of the decisions that are made in Star Wars shows and Marvel shows that have to do with the streaming structure, which is sometimes chaotic. So those weird beats that end the shows, and you're like, wait, what? And it's a bigger decision that's out of even the show's hands. There's some in Andor that I'm just like, oh, that pretentious art fuck. Oh my God, that writer is probably bad at parties. Like, that's just a personal thing. That's a personal thing. But again,
look, man, they can't all be John Nanawood grabbing the saber. All right.
Yeah,
they can't all.
It was good.
They wish.
No, well, yeah, it's a bigger conversation. I mean, you and I, Alden, are going to be talking about Ryan Condal's comment soon on Casterly Talk. But it's like, you know, the complaints of the end of season 2 of House of the Dragon, I think, are valid. But that's HBO's decision. It wasn't the show's decision to cut the show off when it did. So, anyways, all that to say, I want to clarify, like, it's just a personal thing sometimes when I'm just like, oh, this writer finished while he typed that. Oh yeah, you sense it.
And I just say that so people don't get on us for it or whatever. But Ken, I mean, you and I, we're already talking, and we've been friends for 5-6 years almost at this point.
I say 2, but if you say 6, great.
But Ken went full Lorne on me for a second. He just immediately put up the emotional barrier and was like,
but really 2.
But it's that thing of like, we do a show. So, but I don't. But I'm saying that to say that I don't remember.
Had a good time.
I remember leaving the Andor premiere, texting you or DMing you something like that, and being like, "This show's angry." And I know your reviews were very glowing on ForceCenter, but I don't remember. It's hard to go back in time and remember the specific of how you felt about Luthen and that idea of like this Black Ops operation and this stuff. as it happened. Like it's hard to sort of unfeel what you feel now. But do you remember your baseline?
Yeah, well, I think my opinion on the show has not opinion, but my opinion's always been positive. Some of the takeaways from 2 years ago now, right? Two years ago, almost 3 years ago. When was the first season? 2022?
3 in September.
Yeah.
Oh wow,
I hate it, dude. I hate it. It's awful.
Some has changed in the sense of as the world has changed around us, where I'm like, I'm definitely more on board for needing some Saw or Luthen tactics, just maybe not the people themselves. But when we get to it, or when we stumble onto it, the internal versus external is an interesting conversation around this show, or even Rogue One in 2016, from my point of view, where sometimes I'm just like, hey, it's still a Star War. Be careful jumping it outside the barriers to real world in so direct ways, and so specific ways, because it's still about a war that's about to start. And are you prepared for that? But all that to say, where I'm now in 2025, as we're recording, I'm watching Cory Booker go into his 25th hour. I'm like, that's not a Luthen or Saw tactic, but that's not a Mothma tactic to me, and I'm more interested in exploring what Luthen, where he'll end up. Now my worry is to jump all around to the other fandom, to paraphrase Peter Dinklage talking about the complaints about season 8 and specifically Daenerys Targaryen. Maybe you shouldn't have tattooed a dragon on your arm after the 4th season and waited for our story to finish. I think we'll see where Luthen ends up. I think he's going to be more of a problem this time around in a more vibrant, not subtle way.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing about, especially as we look at like the outside world as well, and we're thinking about creators. Like every time we talk about Rebels or Clone Wars or Ahsoka or Bad Batch to a lesser extent, but still, created by, we talk about it through the Filoni lens, which is the lens of having inherited George's sensibilities, good and bad, in his sense of in his creativity, whatever. You look at Jennifer Corbett, we know she's a veteran, and to me that colors everything that you watch.
That's forgotten too. Glad you brought that up. That is actually forgotten a lot about her background.
Yes, 100%. Like, and I've Jarod knows I've bitched about this 1,000 times. That show went 3 seasons. Not a single interviewer ever asked her about this.
Nope.
Maybe she said, "Don't ask me." That's her right. But but it never came up. But I say that to say, you look at Gilroy, and it's like, he is a guy who, as we saw, gets on the picket line, grabs the bullhorn, says what he has to say. Like he does believe it. And so I think it might be easy to sometimes, and not that we're doing this, but I think in general, the sphere of like, well, he created Luthen. He didn't create Saw, he didn't create Mothma, so he created his own to represent him. And I don't think that's true. I think he wants to explore the spectrum. He's got, he's doing it with Bell and Cinta.
Yeah.
He's doing it with Saw and Luthen.
Yes.
He's doing it with Marva and her whole community. He's doing it with Brasso, going from humble best friend to the first brick thrower. Like he's doing it with Wilman Pak and his pipe bomb. So it's like, it's all throughout. I think with Luthen, he summed it up with one word. Gilroy has called him an accelerator. He's like, I put Luthen in to be the accelerator. And like, that's not a word that comes with positive or negative connotations. It just is. Well, like, maybe without Luthen, this whole war is like, maybe instead of 19 BBY, it takes a couple more years without a Luthen. Like he's the guy that is pushing this to a breaking point.
What I think is funny, and it's so funny because I don't think I ever heard about him using the accelerator verbiage about Luthen.
It's recent, I think, right?
You said, okay, then that's probably why. Because it's funny that you say that, because there's like no connotations. Because to me, who, again, for anybody new around these parts, I take great interest in and have kept up with, in like a kind of pseudo academic way, like extremism, especially online, and like conspiracy culture and that stuff. And like you say, accelerationist without any connotations. I hear accelerationist and I think like Tim McVeigh. Like I immediately go to like, this is somebody who's like mass carnage.
That's really
like,
interesting.
Like absolute fucking hysteria is the cheat code to get shit to happen. Because
but also
accelerationism,
not to shit on your point, but also it's important to note he's not doing that. I know what you're saying, but it's like, I think to combine your point with Ken's cautionary point a few minutes ago, we run the royal the Star Wars, the Star Wars we run the risk sometimes, and I realize this with Acolyte. When Acolyte discourse put me in a really foul mood, and I know it did for you too, Jared, where it wasn't because I had
me too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I almost
and
put
it's
this
like,
show over Acolyte, so I hear it.
no, I definitely was like, I was in a foul mood, and it was also the last days of Alden Twitter, which could be a book.
I love that book. That's a great book.
Yeah, the last days of Alden Twitter, and I was just, but the last Diaz what broke me was people litigating what happened on Brendock as if Sol was an American cop. Like,
yes.
Everybody wanted to. We acknowledge academically that the Jedi are a little bit police, a little bit priest, a little bit ambassador, a little bit missionary, a little bit monk, a little bit Knight of the Round Table. But when we're exploring, they're only cops. And it's like, so not saying you're doing that here, but I just think it's important to, in one hand, be like accelerationist. I think I said accelerator, which is more like a sci-fi, but accelerationist. Stuff, yes, but also we can't be like, and therefore it is, and not saying you're doing that, of course, caveat, but like, he is also still very much about shadows and suggestion and the facade. Like I would say what you're describing to McVeigh is more Saw Gerrera. It
is more Saw Gerrera, and I bring up Timothy McVeigh just because he was some of the first one to come to mind, because I also don't want to run the risk of going, you see, these leftists, they're just as bad as these card-carrying neo-Nazis.
Sure.
Right.
But in all that, that's
also just like generally before to compare Nemec to Cyril Karn because they're excited about things. What my mild pushback there about accelerationism with regards to Saw, and where I have seen, it's kind of that like tanky mentality of like, the sooner we can bring down the American empire, the sooner a new cultural revolution can happen. That I do see some of that in like Luthen a lot, especially in the way that like he is, he knows the kind of hijinks Saw Gerrera gets up to. He's like, hey, Saw, you want all this tech, buddy? You want?
I think he sees
very
Saw
grim
as like,
intended when I say that.
He sees a useful sledgehammer in Saw.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely. And I think I think Luthen Rail is the coldest an accelerationist can get, because you have somebody who recognize for people to really take this shit seriously, the lid needs to pop all the way off. And I can't make the lid pop all the way off on my own, but I can get some people who are really passionate, who really care, who have, some morals that are even more malleable than my own, and a higher threshold for violence than me, to get enough like individual pop-offs around the rim of the lid to watch that fucker pop off the pot. And again, like, I'm not saying like he is like an accelerationist to like, to the point of just wanton violence, and in the same way a lot of accelerationists, left and right in the real world, are like, like the Boogaloo boys on the right, where it's just like, everything is a step closer to trying to make shit into the Turner Diaries. But for it to get there, we need a massive like unfurling of government. I don't think Luthen's quite there, but I do think that like, if I were to define him with a word, much like Gilroy, like I do see him.
It does
as
still
a
fit
very
him.
Cold accelerationist. Absolutely.
I just more meant to clarify in terms of style and in terms
and
of
I know what you mean.
But also for the listener and viewer too. It's like, we're going to be doing a lot of like this and this in the real world, and I don't want people to, because even Tony Gilroy's fallen into this himself, where he brought up I know he brought up Pelosi, and I think he brought up Hillary in regards to Mon, and I hold Mon in a much higher regard than I do either.
I also hold Mon Mothma in a higher regard than Yoda.
But sure. But it's like, I think that and to your point, of what you brought up about who he uses, it's like he knows he needs his saws to burn shit, but he also knows that he needs his Mons to actually clock in and go to work. Because I think Luthen ultimately knows he's a coward. You know, that's part of his point to Lonnie, is that he is a coward.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the value. That's the importance of Mon Mothma and her rebellion. And I think season 1 of Andor did bring just some wonderful Mon Mothma stuff to light. It's just been a joy. It's my favorite part of the show, I think, is the discovery of Mon Mothma's full and complete life, as far as we know it now. But, you know, she comes off as, I don't want to say weaker, but she comes off as less in charge than I thought in my canon study. You know what I mean? Like I was a little surprised to see that kind of. I get the wavering's real. The stuff with her is so real and wonderful. But like, yeah, it was a weird dance for me to watch her kind of have to answer to Luthen when I'm like, that's Mon motherfucking Mothma, man. Like you take your wig off and recognize. Like,
no, absolutely.
And that was just one of the things, my struggle with the show. That it's not struggle, again, just one of the big questions of season 1. And what made me think about this is you need her in the greatest way possible. She is about to become the figurehead of this formed and fully functional rebellion. She's still going, and which is not about just going into the halls of governance and voting. It is about action, and she knows that that needs to happen, and it takes the flipper of Radis to really accelerate that. I'd love to see Radis and Luthen have conversations. That would be amazing.
Please, there's 12 episodes. Please, God, just one scene.
If Luthen survives, I don't think he will. If Luthen survives, I want to have like a fade out of credits and a fade in where we just see some of our characters, what happened to an American Graffiti style, that we see them in A New Hope and Rogue One. And I want Radis to be like, I say we fight. And in the shadows, Luthen just goes, yes, sunless sky, Radis. Yeah. This is what I want.
Yeah, and we joke, but like, I'm glad you put that visual in my brain, because it's the thing that
a bad motherfucker.
I like about Luthen is that when I saw his speech in One Way Out, I remember one of my first thoughts was like, how fascinating it is to see a character that knows he doesn't get to be at Yavin. He doesn't even. He might not even know that Yavin is the place. Like, whether they've scouted it at this point is up in the air. But it's like to have someone that is aware. I don't get to be a part of that. But when he glimpses it, he has 2 moments of actual euphoria in the season. One, when the Aldhani job is a success, and he throws his arms up and has the sigh of relief in his back room. And then the other one is way subtler, and it's Marva's speech, because it's him realizing what Nemec said about spontaneous rebellion. And he cracks the slightest smile with his hood up when he's in the crowd. And it's like an acknowledgement of maybe it can happen without accelerationists. Like, it's almost like he starts to have like a glow of like, this happened and I didn't orchestrate this. I did not, like, he had Bix in the town, but he did not do this.
Yeah.
Don't you
the daughters of Ferrix never left his mouth.
Yeah. But don't you want to pull him aside and be like, hey, dude, you could be here. Calm down, man.
Like, I do, and I don't. It's like, it's
I can't be there. Yeah, you can. No. Yeah, you can.
Logically,
I don't want to.
Logically, I do want to tell him that. But then I think that Luthen, and this is part of what we're talking about. It's like, he brings, and we can also widen it too to gender, which, like, I would also like to point out, perhaps not the greatest panel to be dissecting the gender politics of this. As it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh. Here we are.
We can't have 16-person panels. I learned this at other shows. We take heat at Collider sometimes. It's like, what are you going to do?
We're doing what we can. We're doing what we can.
Breaking news. Anyway,
I also needed to be shouted down from having 30 people on screen at once. So,
well, hey. So it's like, there is
5 years.
Jarod, you don't have to do it. Yes, I do. You don't. Sunless skies.
To the original trilogy's like credit, and obviously much more could have been done. Caveats. 70s and 80s, though, there is an air and a regality and a femininity to the rebels as presented. And I'm of course talking about General Riken. the most beautiful. No, I'm kidding. But he is really handsome. But the
piece of ass, that General Riken.
I remember as a kid seeing Mothma for the first time and thinking that she was a queen because we have a princess, and I don't know who this lady is, and it just seemed like, oh, this is like, okay, this must be like, she's in charge, and she is, but like didn't know the context. And then I think, so that's like, there's always this optimism and nurturing that happens in the rebellion that is very maternal. Like we take all comers, we don't judge you. We literally, like, we got Han and Lando, two of the most notorious fucking lawbreakers in the galaxy, and immediately gave them high rank. Like that's how like nurturing and like loving we are as a group. And I think Luthen presents a timely 2020s rage, but also the burn the candle at both ends masculinity, as opposed to the.
I knew that's where we were going. I'm glad.
Because it's like the feminine nurturing and the long view that our mothers sometimes have or our partners sometimes have that we don't, gets them through. But I said this the other night to some friends just talking about Andor off air. Someone said, why do you think Mothma's so muted? Like in a canon context, we know in a real world context, they didn't know she would be this character. Why is she why losing the style? Why the short hair? Why the somberness? And I'm like, because she's the last one. Bale, Brea, Luthen, Saw, probably Cham. It's like they're all gone. They're all the Bothan spies. Mr. Bothan. They're all gone.
Garmel Iblis.
Sure. And
okay, put down those books, Jared.
Noah Jabel, probably dead. And she's the last one, and she has had to burden. She's had to burden.
I'm glad he's dead. I hope he burns in hell.
She's had to burden Leia, which she knows is a shitty thing to do, necessary, and that's why when it's over, she's like, "You need to go on a honeymoon. I am commanding you to go on a honeymoon," because she knows she robbed her in a lot of ways of young womanhood, and so it's like there's all that, but Luthen is like we're men and we can destroy it, and I'm damned to use the tools of my and I relate to that because it is like we've seen it right now, like. Like as we're recording this, there's a record-breaking historical filibuster happening of somebody.
I think it's all wrapped up.
It's all wrapped up. Okay, so at the time
it's all over, but the trip to Chili's.
It's over. That is taking the longest piss of his life.
They went to the Hard Rock Cafe across from the theater where Lincoln was shot. It's great chicken wings over there. You can get
God bless.
Corey, all apps are on me. All right, thanks, buddy.
Oh man. There's like a John Wilkes like booth special. Like
I've eaten there. I think there is. Okay, can I just cut off your Luthen monologue to say, Alden? I really like your point. I think George Lucas, if he was here in Flannel, would agree. And let's be honest, probably having the wings at the Hard Rock Cafe as well. That he has said often, the story of rebellion is Leia's story. You got these two buffoons around her, Luke and Han, but the mature adult story is hers. And I love your description of the rebellion having these kind of maternal instincts at its core, and that doesn't discount the need for a Saw or a Luthen or the examination of it. I think that's a lot of what Tony is trying to do and his team of writers. There was a recent interview I read with him that was it was an okay interview, but it was just like, Tony basically had to say, we didn't write this script like 2 months ago. We wrote this second season was written years ago. I'm writing about the Roman Empire. I'm writing about history, and it's just going to repeat itself. And I think Luthen and Saw do represent a lot of what you're talking about, and that we can't discount what they bring to the table, but we must analyze the ends and their means, and that Mothma represents a lot of what you're talking about. So that's why when she's off her foot a little bit, off her footing, it's not a bad thing. It's not an attack on Luthen and they took away this woman's power and gave it to this white man. I think you can read into it that way, but I think it's just an examination of what's going on. And I think Mothma's going to come out of this with her feet on the ground here, right? I think that's a lot of what the second season
and again, this is like also the thing about like being canon consumers, right? Of like not just movie guys, is that like we are able to watch those Andor scenes knowing like she's the one on the run. She's the one with the ghost crew. She's the one that's there for Andor. Like, and I think, again, to put when we do start to dance in the lines of the real world, there have been, I think, especially amongst those of us that are, I would say, in the entire left-leaning spectrum, whether that's someone like Cory Booker, who's like, I don't think is like super great, but it's like he acknowledged today, like they would obstruct us every chance they fucking get, so it's like, why not? Like he finally hit that point. He finally hit fuck it. And I think that is sort of like the real life version of use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. Now, I'm not saying do what Jarod calls cool J6, but it's just like, there is some Jarod.
First of all, I thought that was some sort of rapper. Now I get now I get what you're doing.
Jarod loves
that's actually my name. I got a mixtape
of
floating around
cool
Pittsburgh
J6.
Right
He's like, why don't we just do a cool J6? I'd be down there with my sword. I'd be but it's like, yeah, like we're not. When Luthen says that, it's not the show advocating for like find Alani, hold him hostage, and make him work for you, but it is saying you have to acknowledge that the rule book has been thrown out.
Well, and with a lot of that, what I also like is that Ken, as you alluded, with like Leia, that she's the mature story of like building an insurgency to overthrow the Empire. Like you said, look at Han, look at Luke. This like Han is like rediscovering who he is after years of people telling him that he's not actually a pirate, but he's a decent human being. And then Luke is like finding Space Jesus and his father, who's also Space Jesus. But like when you look at like the pillars of what builds and sustains the rebellion, it is 3 women. It is Mon Mothma, it is Leia Organa, and it is Hera Syndulla. And without those 3 who are able to, and because you have people like Luthen who are laying the groundwork, Saw laying the groundwork, all of these people who are like these disparate pockets of fomenting. You have these 3 pillars in Leia, Mon, and Hera that are able to like somehow bind them all together and hold on for dear life and keep them together. And I think that also speaks to, Mon is more cunning than we give her credit for. I forgot because I just finished rewatching season 1 today, and watched like the last 5 episodes in one sitting. And I forgot about Mothma's brilliant kind of rope-a-dope with her driver Mole.
Oh yeah, great.
That like, because she is kind of framed as kind of like, I want to say whinging, but she is kind of like, oh, Luthen, do we really have to do this? And Luthen's like, yes, we do. And I'm going to, again, like weapons of my enemies and burn everything to the fucking ground. Fuck the Empire. And
there will be no rules going forward, which is one of my favorite lines of his. He's enjoying every minute of that. Stellan, the character. The character's tortured, but Stellan Skarsgård's eating it up.
He's just chewing the scenery, and it's incredible. But like, so like Mon is kind of framed as kind of like, oh God, my like pocketbook is getting looked at. Like she, like there is that moment, but then I think there's a great reversal there where it's like Mon Mothma is an ostensibly normal human being who's about to commit an incredible act of treason, who's a little freaked out about it. But do not act like she's not one of the baddest bitches on Coruscant right now. With, again, the way that she fully big dicks and humiliates Perrin, using him as a meat shield with her driver who's an ISB plant. Like, I was sitting there, great scene. Fully forgetting that moment. With with just my jaw in my lap. I'm like, God damn, she's good. So like it is that weird complicated thing where like it feels like the show is saying you need a Luthen to set the table for a Mothma, which even that on a gender politics way I have opinions about, and as a Star Wars fan I have opinions about, because I want every conflict to be capable of being solved by you failed your highness, I am a Jedi like my father before me. I would like to think that 9 out of 10 conflicts can be resolved by like successfully out fencing and then moralizing against your enemy.
Which we've said before. Like we had a conversation recently. I think it was off air of like Star Wars is it can be best summed up by the thesis statement. We wish we could have star peace, but like it's like Star Wars is always in the name of like we would like to talk it out. Oh, we can't. like that's what Star Wars is. But it is
Sometimes
always
you got to put a fascist in the fucking dirt.
yeah.
But
It is always with that
diesel
foot
will come
forward
out.
though.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, it's the same kid that destroyed a Death Star and took a million lives with him and threw a grenade up into a Snowwalker and takes the troops with him. Yeah, he has fought, but it's
think of the Death Star contractors. But
you're also making me think of there's this weird along the way. Yeah, you wonderful youngsters didn't grow up in an era where we all suddenly someone said and thought they were supposed to be, they were really deep. We're like, have you ever thought about it that the rebels are actually the terrorists? And it's like, congratulations, you just solved one of the points of Star Wars. That they are taking down a fascist government there, and your definition of what is needs to be analyzed.
The rebels are terrorists actually isn't that so funny. The bad guys are right. Like brain disease is really funny because you'll have some people like I, as a teenager, would say that ironically because I would joke with my friends that I'm like, I would like to like ipso facto my way into being able to say that I like the Empire more simply because aesthetically they're cooler.
Yeah, they got the cooler toys. It's always the right thing.
Because the hallways of the Death Star and that like cold industrialism is more visually appealing to me than some like podunk cave on Hoth. Totally. You know, like I would do that. But then there are people who I'm like, oh,
Echo Base just getting shit on out of nowhere.
Yeah.
One of their coolest bases. What the hell's wrong with you? I'm kidding. Continue.
No, but like literally that, like the amount of people who are like, they'll be like, oh, well, the rebels are the terrorists, ha 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 ha, and then like a fucking weird like.
It's definitely like little.
Maybe the Shredder had a point type shit, and it's
little Tyke's like baby's first analysis. Like it's just like
well, it's also like and again, I grew up in this time period where you're like, oh, you assume the Empire was this far off, distant bad guy as opposed to a statement on a lot of things in the world that George was putting out there. Dude, but again, George wrapped it up in Ewok, so I don't blame 7-year-old Kenny.
If late 80s, early 90s Ken had showed up to like a feminist lit class and explained how the Ewoks were the Viet Cong, it would have been knee deep.
Avengers level threat.
But yes.
But no, and like there are so many people who still to this day need to have it explained to them. Like I don't begrudge somebody who hasn't heard George Lucas tell James Cameron that the Ewoks are the Viet Cong.
Right.
Have you not seen that? I could send you the link. I could send you the link to that.
I personally love finding people who haven't heard that direct quote because I love saying the sentence, the Ewoks are the Viet Cong. That's a fun thing to say to another adult human being. It's a like top 10 fucking sentences you get to say in the real world. But but explaining that to people like, yes, like this has always been like this. It goes over a lot of people's head. And I do think Andor is very true to the ugly side of resistance. You know, you look at legitimate resistance movements, you know, like the French people, you know, trying to hold out during a Nazi invasion. Like a lot of Andor speaks a lot of truth to the realities of fighting fascism. And I think that in the Star Wars as a buffet, Star Wars as a, you know, tapestry, you'll get a Venmo from me later, Alden.
Thank you. Well, you said his. I was waiting for you to say mine. That's the thing. The buffet is copyright ForceCenter Incorporated, and the tapestry is copyright Diaz.
See, this is the thing. I hang out with so many people with great Star Wars opinions that by default listen to ForceCenter that I forgot that the buffet was a ForceCenter joint. It's just so ubiquitous in the lexicon among my friends because I keep great fucking company.
That's a separate cover. We don't ever seriously claim the only one.
But you should.
Prequelist was one early on.
Invented Speculate Responsibly,
and that's the one. I got. Say it all you want. We don't even need credit. But there's sometimes that it's out there that people have never heard our show, and it's like you want to be like, hey. But it's different show than
not necessarily the time for it, and we're going to transition to our next topic here in a minute.
Yep.
I just need to say, and I can't remember. I want to say it was on Anytime, and it might have been on the Blathering. I think one of the most like great moments I've had, and allow me a moment to kiss your ass, as someone who's been a fan of yours since a teenager. I think it was on Anytime when you had your yeah, ForceCenter is the best Star Wars podcast, motherfucker, and I'm tired of pretending it wasn't. Alden will appreciate this. As someone who's been a fan of your work, who is now like lucky enough to like be like friendly with you, and like speak with you like off camera and about like shit. I would love to seeing you have your like Kendrick Lamar man at the garden moment. And I'm like, yes, ForceCenter deserves it all.
ForceCenter truthers, man.
Not necessarily the point, but it's important to me.
We're record. If you know rock and roll history, we're the Replacements, which was this great 80s band out of Minnesota that was also directly influenced by Big Star, Alex Chilton's band. But because of Replacements, you had bands like Nirvana and the Goo Goo Dolls, and Paul Westerberg, the frontman of Replacements, continued on as a very bitter rock grandpa.
Jarod, there is a Replacement song in Guardians 3. If you need a reference. The song I Will Dare is in Guardians 3.
I will dare that. Alden knows like classic rock is my weak point.
Anyways, I appreciate
sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off. I was just gonna say, before we move on to the next point, I just wanted to throw in one last thing about Mothma and her relation to all this. Is that I think so much of the framing that we've been unpacking, and I think what we're coming down on here is a big ol', it's complicated in a good way. Is Luthen like precursor or boss or laying the foundation or guiding Mothma? All those things very murky, a mix of context. But there is one thing that he is for Mothma, and that is cautionary tale. And I think it's very interesting, and I'm sure this will be part of season 2 as we head into Yavin and a more formalized because come Rogue One, there is Draven. Yes. Who is definitely in the shadow of Luthen in a way, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a Luthen recruit. We'll see what happens. But
I like that.
But he answers to her, and the hierarchy is way more clear and firm. And I wonder if Luthen's end, whether it's explosive and gnarly, or if it's just ignominious and sad and depressing, or all of that, if that will be the thing that makes her think, I do need to go further, but I can never be that. And we know that she will, because this is the same woman that will send those Bothans to die, knowing that it is necessary to get that information. Mothma in these years post Andor and Rebels becomes, a foot in military, a foot in diplomacy. But she will always remember this guy she used to work with, that she cannot be. We can't ever allow ourselves to be that. We had one of our friends die, and we had one of our other friends become a depressed, paranoid cyborg and then die.
But also gets a lot of people killed, and it's like her point. I think I really like your point there, Alden, of just like coming to the point of we're gonna crack some eggs. We need to go to war. We're gonna do this. I also need to keep this ship going in one direction. And like with Saw, it's like, how effective are you, buddy? You've done some good things. We're in the same spot we were 19 years ago when you started this shit. And I like your shit, but we're not moving forward. Someone's got to move the ball forward, and we got to find a way to do that.
And Rogue One, you won't even talk to us.
You won't even talk to us. And I think there's and also what's wonderful about this, and Alden gets so excited he cut himself off.
That's never happened before. StreamYard said, "We've lost connection to your camera." I was like, am I spitting too much?
Alden.exe has stopped.
So weird.
And I know we're moving on to another section, which is great. But
you guys are setting up again. It's clear you guys have been doing this for a very long time, because you're segueing right into the leftist infighting simulator section.
Great, yes, but what I love about Andor, there's many things. We could do a review of the show and the acting, the writing, the performances, and the way it looks, the way it's shot. There's so many things I love about it, and I love other Star Wars too. But I love that Star Wars, the original trilogy, was pretty straightforward. There was a choice to make it a myth, to make it good and evil, and there were some things in there. And then George later on says, "Hey, what if I was to start getting into the weeds a little bit?" And an entire generation of fans rejected it, I think incorrectly. I was part of it at first. But there's a lot of other things to that side of the story. But Andor does have this wonderful ability to be like, we are going to analyze. We know the end game. We know the winning play that's run by this rebellion. But it's fun to crawl into the weeds and analyze all of it along the way. And Cassian Andor ends up being the perfect point of view character for that. And so all the conversations about Stellan as Luthen, Saw Gerrera, who again one of my favorite characters and one of my favorite performances in Star Wars with Forrest Whitaker. It's fun conversation to me. I think what you said something earlier, Alden, that it's like there is sometimes that again when it spills out to the real world where we move on from discussing something and then taking those discussions and applying them to our own lives till we take them as a statement. That goes to the Acolyte thing. A show I loved, and Leslie Headland's a great Star Wars creator, and wish to God she'd continue or could come back. But I was frustrated by they're not cops. They are not cops, guys.
This is not that.
Stop doing that.
Stop. Throw another example, a John and Dave example, because it's like, even though they get accused of being the action figures are so simple, so stupid, there's so much going on there, and everybody
started. You've heard me do this rant like 5 times this year already.
But like we attached, like, because season 1 of Mandalorian came out, and there was that's interesting, Dave introducing a helmets only faction. I wonder what that's about. Then we got Bo-Katan being like, it's Children of the Watch, and then every Star Wars fan that had a little bit of religious trauma immediately started with it's a cult, it's this, it's that, it's fundamental. And I was guilty of that too. I was calling them fundamentalists and everything. And then season 3 comes around, and it ends up being a little bit more, Jarod, you throw around Pollyanna. It is a little bit like one day the armor just comes forward in chapter, I think 6 of that season, the pirate, and is like, we can all walk 2 ways. We need to go take back home. And it's very simple and easy, but at the same time, I'm like, they never said they were doing this fundamentalist story. We said that.
We said it. Yes.
They were doing a story of the diaspora setting aside their differences, coming together and doing the reclamation of the homeland. And when they get to the homeland, there's a third group. There's all the scavenged guys. And it's
I forget about them. Yeah.
That's what they're doing. And so I think Star Wars fans, myself included, we're all guilty of being like, especially in between seasons of things, because we have time to cook. We have time to sit around. This happened, of course, the most grand example was Rey. It's like, no. Like, Kylo Ren is allowed to be wrong. Just because we sat around from 2017 to 2019 taking his word as gospel, it's like, that does not mean that that's so there's all of that baked into what we're saying about.
Sure.
Like, that, like it's worth even revisiting this post Andor season 2.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's like, then I'll be like, so we got his ending. And
how much bloodshed? How much needless bloodshed is Luthen going to cause? Because I think he's going to cause a lot.
We've already seen what these guys are capable of, right? And like, again, they are different, but like Saw got Tech killed, and like I'll die on that hill. And I know a lot of people want to exonerate him and everything, but again, I think that's us not wanting.
I'll die on that hill like Tech did.
Right?
Well, you'll die going down the hill.
He died in the sky, I think you'll find.
But
no, I mean, but yeah, I think that like we are in a fascist American era, and we don't want Saw to be wrong because we wish we had him, and I understand that. But at the same time, it's like, we again walk and chew bubblegum. Like, I can be like, damn, like Saw, really good career. Also, some pretty horrific fumbles, and both are true.
Well, absolutely. I think that, like, when it comes to, again, and like, I don't want to trivialize very real, ugly, horrific things going on in the world. But like, revolution and resistance is not always, nor is it ever really pretty. I think that, like, and again, I do not make this comparison lightly. I do not make this comparison in any type of like frivolous way. But like, a lot of the Saw Gerrera of it all right now in 2025, like I see echoes of the conversations happening about Israel and Palestine, where it's like, I think most people, if they're being honest with you, can say October 7th was ugly, horrific, and like, fucked up and depraved. Like any loss of life is horrendous, and it's tragic, but also have the wherewithal to go. But there are foreign policy decisions that Israel and the world writ large have made for decades that set the table for acts of profound and heinous violence to take place? Does it excuse the people with direct blood on their hands who went into a place and killed a lot of people? Does it excuse that because the powers that be, with enough global backing, with every single country supporting Israel's behavior in Palestine for decades, justify what happened on that day? No. Does what happened on that day justify what's happening right now in Gaza? Hell no. But
it's do your actions exist in a vacuum?
Yeah. No, do your actions exist in a vacuum? And the answer is no.
They just don't. Not for anything.
You look at Saw Gerrera and it's like, yeah, this guy's out of his fucking gourd. This guy is doing some buck wild shit and costing decent people their lives, people who could have helped further a fight against the rebellion, like Tech. As much as I talk shit about him, like Tech,
you're wrong.
It's still tragic.
Yeah, sure.
But it's still tragic. And again, his actions don't exist in a vacuum. This is somebody who, again, we culturally, after being Star Wars fans for 50 years of its existence and all of our lives, we look at Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star and going, oh, look at that scary ball in space that blew up an entire planet and eradicated billions in an instant. Him blowing up that space station that we saw maybe 30 people on ourselves is justified. But we then look at it and go, oh, this was a terror attack. This was a terror attack. Again, to go back to the Rebel Alliance or our terrorists, it's like the meme everybody liked to share, making that joke which also trafficked in some weird tropes and stereotypes where, hey, look at this young man whose parental figures were murdered by the state, who's now joined a kind of funky religious organization that's into some kind of weird shit. Who
a guerrilla paramilitary wing.
Joined a guerrilla military outfit and blew up a fucking military installation. Saw Gerrera,
because as again, another baby's first analysis thing is just the Empire are the legitimate government. And that's the difference between I actually do like to point this out to people when people accuse the sequels of retreading. I'm like, well, it's important to note that the First Order did not trick anyone into a transition. The First Order did not. They do not legislate.
Yeah,
they are exactly. They are purely an insurgency. They are purely a military op. They are. They will. They. I guess they think when we've nuked enough worlds, we'll figure out how to govern. But there's no governance with what they're doing.
No, none whatsoever. But yeah, and again, like you said, babies first, whatever. And again, those memes that love to talk about, young man orphaned, joins a cult, joins some weird fundamentalist religion, and now goes to commit a insane act of terror inside of his airborne craft. I'm sure if Saw Gerrera survived Jeddah, he'd have been sitting in the back of the Yavin 4 briefing room and just going, I like your style, kid.
I've said before,
you just
the greatest tragedy,
millions of Imperials in a moment.
The greatest tragedy of Star Wars is that Saw didn't get to meet the Ewoks. Because they have clarity of purpose. It's the Ewoks were interesting. So they're kind of take over the forest? No.
Sherpa has clarity of purpose.
He does, and to your point, Jarod, it gets into some heavy shit, and
he'd have given Tebow a fucking Gatling gun in a second.
Not every Tebow who wrote an Ewok manifesto, and that is canon. It's people don't, the real world, especially with what's going on in Palestine and Gaza and everything. It's an exercise in holding more than one thought in your head at the same time, right?
The tagline of Anytime, multiple truths.
Truths, where it's I lost a real life friendship because the person who has our politics thought that
I remember you telling me about this conversation, and it was upsetting.
Devastating. It still bothers me. I haven't spoken to this person, and they were like, "You're both sidesing it, and it's the violence against the oppressor." And I'm like, it is also the single greatest loss of Jewish life mathematically. Since the other one we all know it was an atrocity. It's just I can hold both in my mind. And that was fresh. after. So it's like everything that's happened since. It's like, does the retaliation, when does it stop being all that shit that like we agree on? But it's like, yeah, and that's obviously a huge example. But there are small ones too of like, can you acknowledge like I said this the other day on Anytime, our boy Bernard. It's like he is the most prominent American, and I stress American leftist because in many nations he's just standard in a lot of ways. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, I love Bernie Sanders. I think he's weak on a couple issues. I could have both thoughts in my mind. I think his immigration stuff is very old man. I think it's very dated. And I think, and there are things, but he also exists. So the next crop can exist.
Absolutely.
And that's that's generational, and that's very Star Wars, and it's part of when we talk about this leftist infighting stuff, and Saw's rattling off all these groups in season 1. It's an incredible scene, and it's like all these groups that all of us were like, I want to know more about them. I want to know more about them. I want it's like so most of them still are not defined. And
mark me down for human cultists. I'd like to get the
Oh, I know. I know.
I want to know so much about
the galaxy partitionists in my mind are like. The tobacco chewers of space. Like, that just does not sound good.
Those are the two ones I'm the most into.
Galaxy Partitionists just sounds not good. But we all watch that scene, and it's like watching Luthen react, and Luthen's just sitting there listening to this. Like, all right, like Luthen is looking at him almost in a way of like, you don't understand that I need all of you. And which is where I really do agree with Luthen. I think that's Luthen's best point is
absolutely
telling Lonnie I need heroes, listening to Saw bitch about the groups, and Luthen reminds him, not only do I need all of you, but he repeatedly makes Saw acknowledge out loud the total cost. When he's like, 30 men, and he's like, plus Krieger. He's constantly adding in the plus Krieger because he needs Saw to know, yeah, that guy that you don't like, he's about to die too. While we're here.
Yeah. While I'm sparing you and your men, and I think that's also something important where it's like, again, I am not here, I'm not going to give anybody clips of like, oh, here's a leftist, pro-Palestinian person saying like anything positive about the goings on of October 7th, because I'm not, but like talking about like the parallels here and like, the place that Andor does, to its credit, go to that place of like, any type of fighting the system will get ugly, and there are going to be people who do take it many, many steps too far. But like, the US after 9/11, I don't want to compare it to Israel right now because they've been doing shit like this to Gaza for the longest. It's just they could really fully take what little gloves were left on off after October 7th, or felt that they were justified in doing so. But like, that is like the crux of Aldani. Is make them overreact. I like please. I want to run my mouth at you long enough that you want to swing on me and won't stop swinging, so that other people will want to get in the fight.
And that's something that Cassian internalized with Power Doesn't Panic.
Yeah,
he knows that the sign of the panic when they drop the hammer, when you have Yularen in there, and it seems that they're not privy to, but we are. I mean, Luthen is privy to it because he has Lonnie in the room. But Yularen showing up to work and being like, first of all, you made me come to a middle management thing. And I ain't happy about it. Second of all, I was talking to Sheev yesterday, and which is a scene that I would love to see, like in like an Andor novel, like Yularen having to be like, oh God, I got to talk to him directly. Like, and he says like the Emperor wants this shit fucking handled now. Like it shows that there is like already like they had a decade plus of boot on the neck, and then all of a sudden, hey, wait a second, this stomping on people is not as easy as it was.
It's growing.
Absolutely,
it's connected.
Here, one moment. But yeah, and again, you guys are great at just segueing for me. Because like the next thing I want to talk about was kind of like the arrogance of the Empire in this show, which is something I always loved here. Alden, you were on KNR at like 3 or 4 times to talk about Andor. It was like when I normally try to have like a different guest for each episode review. But like you were like the only person who I like fully agreed with, where you and I were having like the existential fandom crisis of like the discourse around this show that I love is driving me crazy, that like I could have on the show and like not feel like a crazy person being more upset at the fandom about the art, that I enjoyed the art, which frustrated me. But the thing that I loved about this so much, and rewatching it again recently, I was just thrilled by this through line, is that Cyril Karn is right about Cassian Andor. He comes at it from this, law and order and, very like corporatist and militaristic, order above all, no matter how many bodies need to be laid down in the name of it on either side. But he's right about Cassian. He is right that he is an existential threat to the Empire, because the actions of Cassian Andor and friends, but all he knows about is Cassian, is going to set off a chain reaction that will not only lead to the dissolvement of the Empire, but the death of its emperor twice.
Yeah, I mean, because like Cyril Karn is an inversion of a trope, right? Like, if you look at either film noir or even just like crime stories in general, there is usually either he's cool, badass, like lone gunman police officer, or fresh out of the academy kid. And fresh out of the academy kid is always like,
a
zealot. There's something bigger going on here, chief. Like there's a bigger plot going on. And Cyril has that. He just sucks and is in it for the wrong reasons. But he still does have there's something bigger going on here trope realization of like, that criminal that got away will, his obsession with Ferrex going wrong is reasonable.
Yeah.
It is reasonable.
Part of it is egotism. Part of that is absolutely egotism.
Part of it is my inadequacies. I have to go home. I have to go home with my tail between my legs. I have a fail son, He'll start a podcast, of course. But but yeah, no, it's interesting because it's like him and Deirdre both have like accurate, and Yularen and Partagaz have accurate readings of the situation. They just lack what they need to retaliate effectively.
Yeah, and like, for as much hay was made of this show not like engaging with like the Pollyanna fairy tale elements of Star Wars and it being inherently better because of that. And again, that's its own discourse and something that I've talked about at length about being frustrated by. What it does always come back to is that the Empire is not too big to fail. It is so big that it's damned to fail. Like every step of the way, the Empire's size and just sheer, weight makes it buckle under itself. Watching the Narkina 5 arc and watching Cyril and Partagaz and Dedramiro falling over themselves and crashing out for months on end, trying to track down Cassian Andor. He's already in one of your fucking prisons.
He's already there.
And this guy, this kind of like galactic level fuck up petty criminal, how is he able to evade the same government that eradicated the goddamn Jedi Order? He gave him a fake name. And because the Empire is too big and is trying to overcompensate for getting, punched in the mouth on Aldhani, they didn't stop to go, hey, does he match any descriptions? Could this guy that we're like stopping and frisking and racially profiling, could this guy potentially have given us a bogus name? They never do it. They never do it. And it is that arrogance. It is Palpatine who was always going to just try to ram the circle peg into this square hole of this time the super weapon will work. This time the cloning project will work. This time I'll be able to seduce this Skywalker to the dark side. This time. And it won't either cripple my military, humiliate my government, or literally get me killed. This time it's going to work. And it's just drenched all over the Empire in Andor. And I think that it's really, I think it is a very deft effort in screenwriting that the Empire's folly is consistent with every other Star Wars story, from the OT to Rebels and everything in between. It is still, we are too big to actually function. And we are so bought into our own hype to a terminal degree. Yeah, and that's kind of my favorite part of how the Empire is shown in this show. Like there's a part of me that's annoyed by the fact that like watching the Empire consistently trip over themselves despite seeming terrifying, and they are terrifying. They are presented as incredibly horrific and powerful and, you know, insurmountable, while also being bumblefucks. And the fact that bumblefuckery is easily covered up by a million little atrocities, like Nemec says.
Yeah. Look what's coming, and at the end of Andor, in just a matter of weeks, Palpatine will do away with the Senate, and how will we maintain control of bureaucracy? Fear. You know, that's their big hubris. Overconfidence is your weakness, and so I love the emotional canon you're talking about, that it is consistent across the way, because an oppressive regime, and any oppressive regime throughout history is usually. The Nick is what eventually gets it. I mean, the whole Narkina 5 thing, you bring that up, but even just the prison itself, that happens because kind of a clerical error, right? Yeah. Someone from 4 gets sent down to 2 and people found out. Oopsie. And I think there's some great truth in that. And I like that you bring that up, that this is from start to finish. This has just been, even going to Cyril Karn, you bring up, we have our boy from Game of Thrones who's his supervisor in the first 3 episodes, and it's like the gross incompetence and the cover up and those 2 guys were shits anyways. We should probably just cover up their death and what happened. It's just, it's these little nicks along the way that are just gonna bring it down.
And that's like, to your point about the consistency, I love that point, because it's like, it doesn't matter the tone, right? It doesn't matter what, if it's a more fantastical chapter or if it's something like this. And I think about a story also in the dark times of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Much was made, I think, very stupidly of fans complaining about little Leia being hidden in Fortress Inquisitorius inside of a long coat. And everybody like, why would they? That's so silly. That's like, wouldn't they notice? No, they wouldn't. They've never noticed. They've never noticed a single disguises, which is, George pulling once again from Wizard of Oz, like that, the OEO strategy of let's put on their costumes and march the way they do.
The like, OEO gambit.
OEO, yep.
The OEO gambit has always worked, and it will always work, because these guys are just trying to get theirs. They're worried about maybe a 2-foot radius around them, and they're walking around with their blasters in fear of their own. Like they know that the next superior officer will kill them or betray them or whatever it is. Like when you're running it all off of that, these Moffs and these admirals and all these people, they wouldn't be able to inspire people the way that any rebel leader does, and that's by design. That's let's go over to another world completely, a franchise I did not expect to reference here. You go over to Pixar's Monsters Inc. and Monsters U. Like that's the movie comes down to that essential thing. Laughter is more powerful than scream. Laughter will always be more powerful than scream. A movie which is about an immigrant showing up in this world as they're trying to then use that immigrant to be their new power source. We can talk about that another time. But it's like that has like real thematic resonance that even a child can understand, that like you can run an operation better on happy than you can on scared. And like children register this, and it is that simple. And that's why, I know this is later in your rundown, but since we're in the last 15-ish minutes of this, it's like, it is, you're going to ask us, Jarod, spoiler alert of what you're going to ask us. Like, is this not present in everything else, right? Like, is this so much more radical than everything else? And it's like, no, it's not. It's just like, I think Andor is an exercise in, George Lucas made a trilogy. And then much like Frank Herbert writing Dune Messiah because he felt like people didn't get Dune, then George comes around in 99 and is like, I feel as if I wasn't clear enough. And then that births the prequel trilogy of like, I thought I was saying these things, and there are the breadcrumbs of it even more directly. Like Ken, correct me if I'm wrong. It's the New Hope novelization that is more explicit about what happened.
It's the opening prologue. Yeah, it's
like
very
they
specific.
talk about the previous government and all that. So it's like it was there back then with Alan Dean Foster, and then I feel like Andor comes around. Obviously, George's not involved, but it's like Andor comes around and is like, this man gave you a fantasy about a child slave and bureaucracy and the separatist movement and all this stuff that ends with the slavery, enslaving himself because of the government and the consolidation of power. He gave you all these things, but because it had a little silly, a marginal amount of silly, you all completely didn't read. So I almost feel like Andor is an exercise in like, if you don't get it now, so help me. Like that's what the show kind of feels like to me. And I resent that sometimes because it's like, I hate that we live in a world of genre elitism that requires its existence. But I mean, that was the thing with the trailer where it's like Ken and I have like playfully argued about this trailer that I call a TV spot masquerading as a trailer. But Ken's point was right. He's like, they need to be handheld by this song and by this tone and by these things. And I get frustrated because it's like, oh, why did I grew up with all of you shitting on the ones that we had, which were extremely clear, so clear that you made fun of how clear it was, right? Like you saw taxation of trade routes, shit on that. And now here it is again. Marva even says we kept the trade routes open. Like that's in her speech. And now we're like, yes, because it doesn't have decks, because it doesn't have Gungans, because it so I resent that. But long way to say, it's always been there. It's there. I think Resistance is the perfect companion to Andor, and it's a slapstick, cel-shaded Disney XD comedy that went 2 seasons, and it is I think the same stuff.
Bad Batch and Rebels do. Yeah, Batch and Rebels do a lot of the same things. Yeah. No, look, even George had to come back in 2005, and it was like, wait a minute. You took the wrong points of Vader. I need to make it even more clear. That's Forget true. seven battles and 7 planets, and let me rework some of the stuff. Some things for better, some things for worse with Padme. But let's this is a cautionary tale. This Anakin kid, it's not to be praised, and that's always the struggle. But yeah, look, as I've said, Alden, you're a 3-syllable man in a 1-syllable world.
Aren't I just?
Yeah, I mean, no, and I concur with that. As we come into like the radical nature of Andor, it is something that deeply frustrates me. We alluded to it earlier with the John and Dave or the action figure guys thing, and how that infuriates me. Same. Alden,
same.
You were the one to use the Mandalorian diaspora tangent that I go on every other week. So like I won't retread that ground, but like again, Book of Boba Fett, everybody's like, oh, look how stupid and silly and cameo, whatever the fuck that means.
It means nothing. It means nothing. I'm sorry.
It means nothing. You're right.
I was triggered. I got activated like the Winter Soldier.
Nothing, Lonnie.
I know. But I'm like, no, like this is a show about a guy whose like entire like role in life was defined for him before he was born, and he was even like, and then you can have a weird conversation about whether or not Boba Fett was born in air quotes, so like his whole life is just set in front of him, and he went along with this thing. He has a near-death experience, has a Jules Winfield in Pulp Fiction-esque come to Jesus moment where he's like, I got to change everything I'm fucking doing. And while he's still trying to better himself, he still doesn't have the words for I want to be a better man. So he's still like in the trappings of being a crime boss, and he's still tethered by while still trying to like undo the exploitative system he tried to put in place. But we all call that the silly Boba Fett show, where a guy
I would also note in that show is
colorful Vespas,
in that show is politickings about people who controls the resources like water. Who it's like it has everything. It has Drash, my beloved, telling Boba Fett, you cannot fight from the castle. You have to fight in the streets. It has to be here. And how that connects to something like Ferrex. I came out of the premiere of those first 3 episodes, and I met Ken's buddy Tony Gilroy that night, and I shook his hand. And I've said this before. the ultimate summation of Tony Gilroy is that while a
Gil.
VIP party was happening over there, Tony leaves VIP and goes to the regular bar because he wants to get his drink away from the dancing. That said, I saw him standing alone at the bar and was like, this says everything. But, I remember my reaction to those episodes, which was fortunate to be able to tell him, was like, I didn't expect you to take on this with so much wrath and like all this stuff. And we had a brief little conversation about it. I did not say this part, but was like, this motherfucker put the police in blue. Not even like
not stormtrooper. There's no.
It's like he made up his
police.
own local cops. Premor, whatever. It's a sector. No, it's a city, man. Like these are he made the space LAPD or NYPD or whatever, put them in there, had someone betray his brown girlfriend's confidence to get her buddy disappeared. And then it resulted in multiple cop killings. He dies. Class traitorism, it all blows up right there. So yeah, I will give this show that it is the more direct version.
Of course,
but directness and content are the different things. Yeah,
and I know that. I know Ken knows that. That is always going to be the sticking point for me. Is that it is not that Andor is more radical instead it's more direct. It is, again,
it's not as much of a parable.
Yeah, Kenobi and Ahsoka both are stories about, much like the Mandalorian, are both victims and survivors of a genocide, having to live with the fact that the aggressor of that extermination was their best fucking friend, and how they put their lives back together and reforge their identities, not only because of, but in spite of that event. Like all of these shows that get this weird, dismissive, it's Disney slop, action.
And what's funny is that
they all are dealing with the same fucking themes as Andor.
Yes.
They're just more subtle about it.
And what's funny is that Cassian fits in. Is that up until Skeleton Crew broke away from it by having youthful heroes, and I will note Jarod obviously is there too. But Din Djarin, Boba Fett, Cassian Andor, and specifically Rosario's Ahsoka are bound by being over 40s. All saying, is this what I am? Can I restart? Can I do something else? Like Star Wars in live action television reached its midlife era of actually exploring that. Like Star Wars movies are about young people. Star Wars shows at this point, and Obi-Wan, have predominantly been about people with a little bit of gray, or in Ahsoka's case, longer montrals that are like, fuck, like
wrinkly or
can I do something else? Can I be something else? And I think that and Andor explores that beautifully. I know canonically he's supposed to be like 26 in the show, and who cares? Who cares? But
that's a rough 26. Diego Luna, very handsome man. That's a rough 26. But no, and I just I think that like the reason why I had like Hubris of the Empire next to is Andor more radical kind of in the show notes. It's because because the answer is no to that last question, and the best way to realize that is through going, look at how the Empire is fucking up the same way in all of these stories.
Right.
Whether it's Jogan Fruit or Leia in like a, 3 mice in a trench coat disguise, or, the fucking Ewoks. Like, let's take the 3 silliest versions of that and put it off to the side. You can't tell me that that's not the same as, guys, we got to find Cassian Andor. The steer guard, Navicomputer. We got to figure this out. And Aldani and boy's rotting in a prison, in your prison right now. And he got through, very similar to Leia in a trench coat. They never went, Cleef? Your name's Cleef? That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, their lack of due process in the situation is going to be part of their undoing. Was part of their undoing. Yeah.
But Ken, because there's so many, we can't give them due process. The
tattoos looked mean.
Yeah. That tattoo of a loth cat is a symbol of Black Sun, actually. But no, I think at worst, the people who I think in really bad faith and a very Jar Jar stepped in poop, therefore these stories have nothing to say kind of way, who put Andor on a pedestal for the wrong reasons. I've said this before, and I've gotten shit for making this comparison, but I'm never going to let it go. They sound like the same people who will like fight in the streets for Zack Snyder's DC universe. You know, like if Star Wars can only be anti-fascist when there's cop killing, drugs, and hookers, then maybe I don't think you've been paying attention. You know, like and that will always be like where I come down on like the discussions about this show. You know, like I have so much fun watching it and like, you know, getting to have those like how did this happen conversations. It was the one thing I was disappointed with Bad Batch was I wanted more of the Imperial transition in the way that with Andor I feel very well served in seeing my birth of the rebellion. You know, in the way that we all know how this is going to end, but how in the hell did we get, you know, people like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa in the same room as somebody like Luthen fucking Rail and Cassian Andor? I love those elements. I think the show does have so much to say, but it's not saying anything that Star Wars hasn't been saying for damn near 50 years. It's just saying it in maybe the most poignant way, in the realist way, in the most direct way. But all of the action figure shows have been on this tip, you know, for about a decade now.
Oh yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Andor very good.
Andor very good. Please, for the love of God, as I've been saying for years, we need to have better conversations about this shit, though.
Dude, I tried, man. I tried.
I know.
I
know you did.
I tried to be the accelerationist of our community and force people into having these conversations. And all I got was
you enjoying the Are you enjoying the sunless sky? Are you enjoying your sunless sky now?
Yeah, what I did is I rode out to Napzok Island, and I joined you there.
Yeah, but I'm more of a Mothma, right? I'm more of a Mothma.
And I've always seen you like that, aesthetically too.
Aesthetically too. Yeah,
it's the soft features.
It is. It's which is my skincare routine.
It's
I know, but
Bail Organa. Ken's our Bail Organa.
Little Bail.
It's funny that he actually. Sorry, I know we got to wrap up, but like Ken Plume, shout out Ken Plume, reposted the Revenge of the Sith deleted scenes, and I haven't done the book yet, Mask of Fear. I know Ken's been loving it.
But that's gonna be 400 pages in. Yeah, almost done.
Probably my next listen, and but rewatching those scenes, Bail, and I've heard that this is consistent in it, that Bail has. I don't want to say swagger, but maybe like he has a little bit of a fire that annoys Mon Mothma at this point, and you can almost see it there in those scenes of very young Genevieve. It's crazy to see her 20 something years ago, and she's like, well, you know, we need to maintain this democracy, show that it's important. And Bale's like, well, look, we got to do something. I'm not saying we become separatists. I'm not saying that. Like he's already like, I'm royalty, bitch. Like he already has like a little bit of like I don't think he realizes how bad it's gonna get in like 72 hours. Like from
no. But the book picks up. You know, it's in the weeks right after, and their relationship is contentious. They are not friends. Mothma has to say that in an interrogation. We are not friends. I do not know him, and we're And it's fascinating to track that, but it's all parts. I'm bummed that I don't think we're going to get Bail in season 2. I think it would have been announced, and maybe it's a wonderful surprise. But I hope to be corrected.
Or even Brea. Yeah,
Brea. Smoke Hessel, greatest Brea. Like it is. It'd be it's a small, tiny 1% loss for me that Bail wouldn't get to troop some scenery in this series because he's so good in Kenobi. Jimmy Smith is so good in Kenobi, representing that generational change. Leia wants to lead, but in her way. Fine, I'm going to help you. It's one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars. Then we'll do it together. But yeah, I'd like to see him factor into some of the stuff going on here at the end because I think he could be not a counter to Luthen, but be the one that's been like, hey man, I thought as you did, but we're in a different era. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm not going to hold against the show if he's not there.
I just want Rom Coda to show up.
Right. It's funny you mentioned Rom Coda. And I did come to the show today hoping to talk about Juno Eclipse and Mars Brood, but I'll talk about Rom Coda instead.
I'll talk about Paris Brood on it.
It's really funny that inside of 24 hours, both of you have brought up Mara's Brood to me.
That's true.
In
Separately, we both did. That's true.
The Rhea Ripley of Star Wars. But what Ram Kata is one of early on. I remember thinking, he would fit in well, not just with Andor. This was like the switch over 2012 to 2014 range of like I would like to see him come over. I did love the Force Unleashed games. It's interesting you say that first, or that book on the second one has some connections. I might do a Wikipedia summary read of that. I don't like the character of Starkiller. I don't like a lot of the. It's not so much the character, much like Andor. It's not the show. It's sometimes the discussion or those who love the characters. But Ram Kota is a very interesting character. I did like a lot of what he brought to the first story. So maybe he'll show up. Maybe Tony Gilroy will be like, it turns out I played the game the entire time.
The Sith Stalker armor is in Luthen's shop.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Tony Gilroy, Secret Force Unleashed truther.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was. I'm sure that's what it was.
As opposed to production designers. Yeah.
Can give me an hour and like a Sheets burrito, and I can sell you on Galen Merrick. I promise. That's my boy.
It's not so much him again. It's some of what he represents, like you said.
For sure.
And I'm trying to be better as I get older too. I guess this is my Boba Fett season 1 or series arc of just being able to celebrate. I'm so excited for Andor season 2, but I had become exhausted by the using of Andor as a bludgeon against other shows in Star Wars, just like we discussed here. So no need to remix it. I'm trying to separate that, and that includes with things like Starkiller or even the EU. I am not a fan of the EU. And a lot of it is just kind of, I lived through the time of just like, buff dudes on the cover of these books it's not my Star Wars. It's just not connecting with me. But it did bring people to the table. And I'm trying to be better about that as I go forward.
Absolutely. Well, I've had an absolutely wonderful time with you guys. Ken, as I said earlier, it is an absolute honor to finally have you on the show.
Glad to be here.
Like I said, ForceCenter is the S tier. Holden, this is Ken's first time. This is like
it's not an absolute honor to have me, though.
It is. It always is. You're one of my best friends in the space.
Fair
one of my best friends, period. No, it's still a great honor. It's just Ken's first time, and I'm very happy to finally have him on the show.
He's cool.
You gentlemen, please. Again, if you're listening and we're watching this and not listening to the ForceCenter, I don't know what the fuck you're doing wrong.
True.
How you ended up at the Cookie Cup show that plays Alex Jones clips, but not that. Something went terribly wrong. But Ken, Alden, please plug everything you guys have going on anytime in particular.
Sure, yeah. Sure. Anytime Ken and Alden airs every Friday live, 11 a.m. Pacific. For now, until some employment situation changes, we're work on that. We're working on rebuilding up Casterly Talk. Easiest thing for me, just go to Napzok.com to get the links to all the things I do, from radio to Star Wars to rock and roll, all those things.
Yeah,
and Why We Love Star Wars, which I did not get. Yes. I finally made time to listen to last year. And the mark of a great audiobook for me is I am not somebody who can just listen to an audiobook while I do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be doing something, whether it's playing a game or whatever. And I, like a cokehead, spontaneously decided to like clean my entire house. Because I was enjoying listening to the book too much and stayed up way late. And when my girlfriend woke up, she's like, "Did you just clean the house overnight?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Why?" I was like, "That Order 66 chapter fucks."
That's it's thank you for that. And I enjoyed doing the audiobook even more than writing it. It was a chance to correct some little printing errors and editorial errors, but also to just swim around in Star Wars. And appreciate y'all plugging and having me in here. A lot of fun, my friend. A lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That book bangs. That book does bang.
It does.
It's very good.
Any other?
And then in addition to Anytime, you can find me personally at Alden Diaz, ThatAldenDiaz, Instagram, Blue Sky. Blue Sky handles are a little bit longer. .bsky.social, I believe. You can find me there. Casterly Talk, like we said, is going to be resuming. We're looking at the back half of April when I return from Star Wars Celebration Japan. If you're attending, you can find me there. Hit me up. I'll be there all 3 days. We'll be hanging out. A lot of people from the Star Wars space. Definitely, I encourage everybody, if it's your first time, walk up, say hi to anybody that you like from online. It is pure joy. It's pure family. And then Ahch-To Radio, I've said this, it is coming back, but not exactly how people expect. It will still be a Star Wars show, but I'm calling it a sequel to the original show. Both of Ken and Jarod know the plan, but I will share more on that.
I'm very excited for it.
Soon.
Sizzle. For me, in terms of things you can find Alden and I both in, Ionized Bastards, the Star Wars RPG show we're a part of. We're about halfway through the final season of Ionized Bastards. Things are heating up. We should be recording the next episode next week. I am very excited. I am full of terror. Just running through this whole season with my butthole clenched and trying not to die. Came a little close at the end of season 2, and I don't want to relive that ever again. Death saving throws while you're on camera, not fun. Also, Epic Confrontations, the Star Wars Trivia League that we're both a part of, that Ken made a brief, hilarious fucking cameo in.
Right, that's right.
That, yeah, I have a match coming up against Scotty Holiday, so I'm going to be going head-to-head with them here soon. So stay tuned, hoping to add another notch to the KO belt here. What was that face? What was that face?
Nothing, man. Wrap it up. You're good.
Okay, but don't wrap it up.
You're good.
You can find me on Twitter, or not really Twitter anymore, but Blue Sky, Instagram, all the places at Dark Jedi 2552 and the Nerd Academy podcast on all of those places, as well as YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Thank you to our $10 patrons, Ray Clausen and Paco. Thank you to everybody watching. We're also going to be coming back with the KNR Versus series here soon. Season 5 is going to be wrapping up with Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati versus Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano to wrap up Season 5. And then we'll be picking up Season 6 in June with kind of an abridged season. In the meantime, we're doing versus topic episodes. You can go ahead and check out the live stream tab on the channel to check out the stream you did with the Bombad cast, where we read Star Wars head-to-head with the Bombad boys. And then at some point, also after Alden gets back, we're going to be doing a Mount Rushmore of our favorite Star Wars fighters episode for the Versus series as well. I'm very excited for that. I think I have my Mount Rushmore picked out, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So yeah, check out our Patreon for that at the $5 tier for the entire back catalog of the Versus series. But thank you all so very much for tuning in. Thank you again to Ken and Alden for joining me here today as we look forward to the return of Andor Star Wars Stories, it's now called. Check out ForceCenter. Check out Ahch-To Radio, Casterly Talk, Anytime. Anytime's my favorite talk show. It's my Friday lunch break tradition. I don't know what I'm going to do with my schedule if you guys change the day, but I'll make it work. Thank you all very much for joining us. We're honored that you have joined us, and may the Force be with you always.
Stop! Move away from the cookie